You ever get that feeling? You're really drawn to, ancient wisdom, these deep ideas, but then you look at the sheer volume of texts and just think, whoa, where do I even start?
Absolutely. It can feel pretty overwhelming.
Yeah. So that's exactly what we're tackling today in this deep dive. We want to pull out the core insights, the really vital stuff from a huge tradition without getting bogged down.
And today, that tradition is Hindu scriptures, a truly vast and incredibly diverse collection of writings.
Right. And for you listening, if you're curious and want to get a solid understanding, maybe get, fairly quickly, but still properly, we've gathered some interesting sources.
We have. We're looking at a general overview called Hindu scriptures, which is great for basics.
Okay.
And then there's a YouTube transcript about the Sita Upanishad, presented by Swayam Prakash Sharma. That gets quite specific.
Zooming in a bit there.
Exactly.
Oh.
And then articles from places like Radha.name, the Vedanta Shastras Library, Vyasamahabharata, Puja.in, and Understanding Advaita Vedanta.
Wow. Okay. So a real mix. General stuff, specific text, different viewpoints, even discussions on like how old some texts are, if they're considered authentic.
Yeah, that mix is really helpful, actually. It gives us the big picture, but also lets us appreciate the nuances and the depth.
So our mission today for you listening is basically to cut through that complexity. We want you to come away understanding the main ideas, how these scriptures kind of fit together and why they're so important without feeling completely lost.
Sounds like a plan.
Okay, so with something this massive, where's the logical place to jump in?
Well, I think we need to start with the basics. What are Hindu scriptures, fundamentally? Our main source, Hindu scriptures, describes them as this huge collection, ancient religious writings, yes, but also oral traditions.
Oral traditions too, right? Not just books.
Not just books. They cover what Hindus consider eternal truth. And the belief is these truths were either, directly revealed by God or realized by ancient sages, wise people in deep meditation.
Okay, so not necessarily one single moment of revelation, but maybe more of an ongoing discovery by these sages.
That seems to be the understanding, yeah. And the collection itself is incredibly varied. You've got the Vedas, the Upanishads, which people often hear about, but also things called Agamas, the Puranas, the big epics like the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, which contains the Bhagavad Gita.
Right, the Gita. Yeah.
And then law books, philosophical texts, texts specific to different denominations. It's a lot.
It really is a massive library. And how did it all get passed down?
Through generations, using both spoken word, really important, that oral tradition, and eventually written texts.
Okay.
And another key point our source makes is that the teachings aren't presented in just one way. They're often tailored sort of to different levels of understanding.
Like different paths up the same mountain.
That's a great analogy, exactly. Making profound ideas accessible to more people.
That makes sense. Now, I saw something interesting mentioned about personal experience versus scripture.
Yes, that's a fascinating aspect. Scripture is definitely seen as a vital source of knowledge about God, about divinity. But personal experience, that direct feeling or realization of the divine, is also highly valued.
So it's not just about reading the texts.
Not necessarily, no. Some philosophical schools really emphasize scripture as the primary path. Others might say that direct personal religious experience is, well, maybe even more important, or at least equally valid.
Huh. So there's a bit of a dynamic there between the received wisdom and your own insight.
Precisely, a balance. The scriptures provide the map, maybe, but the journey involves personal discovery, too.
Okay, got it. So we have this huge, diverse collection passed down orally and in writing, aimed at different levels, and valued alongside personal experience. Now, that source mentioned two main categories, Shruti and Smriti. That sounds important.
It's absolutely crucial. This is the fundamental way Hindus often classify their scriptures. Let's start with Shruti. It literally means that which is heard.
Heard, like listen to.
Kind of. The idea is these are eternal truths, almost like laws of nature, that have always existed, resonating in the universe. Ancient sages, through deep meditation, are said to have heard or perceived these truths intuitively.
Wow. Okay, so they were like receivers, tuning into cosmic wisdom.
That's the concept, yeah. And these sages then transmitted what they heard orally.
And which texts fall under Shruti?
Primarily, the four Vedas, the Rig, Sama, Yajur, and Atharva Veda. And very importantly, the Upanishads are also generally included here, as they form the final part, the philosophical culmination of the Vedas.
So these are the top tier, the most foundational, considered revealed or divine.
Exactly. They contain the core timeless principles. Then you have Smriti. Read that which is remembered. These texts are seen as derived from or helping people to remember and understand the Shruti teachings.
Ah, okay. So Shruti is the direct revelation. Smriti is like the commentary, the explanation, the application.
That's a good way to put it. Most other scriptures, the epics, the Puranas, the law books we mentioned, fall loosely under Smriti.
And is there a difference in how they're viewed or used?
Yes, a significant one. Smriti texts are generally understood to be interpretable, adaptable based on changing circumstances. Things like kala, time, desha, place or land, and guna, individual nature or personality.
So Smriti is meant to be more flexible. It can evolve with society.
Precisely. It's intended to help structure society and guide daily life, so it needs that adaptability. Shruti, on the other hand, is considered eternal and unchanging truth.
Okay, that distinction is super helpful. Shruti, eternal, heard truth. Smriti, remembered, adaptable application. Let's dive into some specifics then, starting back with Shruti. The Vedas, meaning knowledge, right?
Correct. There are 4, as we said. The Rig Veda is the oldest, a huge collection, over 10,000 mantras or hymns.
10,000. What are they about?
Well, that's where interpretations differ, actually. Some traditions focus on the rituals, describe the hymns to various gods and goddesses. Others see deeper metaphysical meanings, philosophical truths about God, the soul, the universe, hidden within those same hymns.
So even within the core text, there's layers of understanding.
Definitely. And dating them is tricky, too. Could be around 1200 BCE, could be much, much older. We're talking deep antiquity here.
Clearly. And then, still under Shruti, we have the Upanishads.
Yes. These really dive deep into philosophy, understanding the self, the Atman, understanding God, Brahman, the nature of reality. There are well over 100 recognized Upanishads.
Over 100. And they, along with the Bhagavad Gita, which is Smriti, you said, but highly revered, and something called the Brahma Sutras, form the basis for Jnana Yoga.
That's right, the path of knowledge or wisdom. So the Upanishads are absolutely central if you're looking for the philosophical core of Hinduism within Shruti.
Makes sense. Okay, let's shift to Smriti, the remembered texts.
Yeah.
You mentioned Upavedas.
Yes, auxiliary or applied Vedas. Knowledge for practical life, there's Ayurveda.
The science of health and medicine. Still very relevant today.
Very, both cure and prevention. Then Dhanurveda, the science of warfare or archery. Gandharva Veda, covering the arts, music, dance, sculpture, poetry. And Arthashastra.
Which is about?
Governance, economics, politics, public administration, how to run things, essentially.
So really practical applications of Vedic thinking across society.
Exactly. Then there are the Vedangas, limbs of the Veda. These are auxiliary disciplines needed to properly understand and use the Vedas.
Like tools for the main job.
Good analogy. They cover things like phonetics for correct chanting, shiksha, grammar, vyakarana, meter for poetry, chandas, etymology, nirikta, astronomy and astrology, jyotisha, and ritual procedures, kalpa. Mostly Smriti, though some debate exists.
Okay, essential supporting knowledge. Next up.
The Puranas, meaning ancient stories. These are hugely important for popular Hinduism
Why is that?
because they translate the often dense philosophy of Shruti into stories, parables, legends, makes it much more accessible for everyone.
So storytelling is a way to teach deep truths, like the parables and other traditions.
Exactly. There are 18 major ones, the Mahapuranas, and many minor ones, compiled over centuries, often focusing on a specific deity or sage.
And they cover everything.
Pretty much. Stories about gods and goddesses manifesting, dharma, karma, death, rebirth, pilgrimage sites, cosmology, even things like Ayurveda and astrology pop up. They're foundational for a lot of Hindu beliefs and practices, even today.
Fascinating how stories can carry so much weight. Then we have the big epics. The Ramayana.
Yes, incredibly popular. It tells the life story of Prince Rama, who's seen as an incarnation of God, his exile, his struggles, defeating demons, returning to rule justly.
A classic hero's journey, in a way.
In many ways, yes. It presents ideal characters, Rama himself, his wife Sita, the loyal Hanuman, his brother Lakshmana. There are different versions. Valmiki's and Tulsidas are famous.
And it's more than just a story, right?
Oh, much more. People recite it. It's the basis for dance, drama, art. It provides ethical guidance. Its influence spread throughout Southeast Asia, too, a cultural cornerstone.
The power of narrative again. And then the Mahabharata.
The other great epic, even bigger, it's often called the longest poem in the world, over 100,000 verses.
100,000. Just staggering. What's the core story?
It centers on a massive conflict, a war between two branches of a royal family, the Kauravas. But woven into that are countless other stories and, crucially, long discussions about Dharma duty, righteousness, ethics.
So action and philosophy combined.
Exactly. Key messages are about truth, justice, sacrifice, upholding dharma, devotion to God, but also the tragedy and futility of war.
And hidden within this massive epic is...
The Bhagavad Gita, probably the single best-known Hindu scripture outside India.
Right. You said it's Smriti, technically, but treated almost like Shruti.
Yes. It's given the rank of an Upanishad by many. It's a dialogue set right on the battlefield just before the war starts.
Okay.
Krishna, who is God incarnate, is talking to the warrior prince Arjuna. Arjuna is having a crisis of conscience. He has to fight against his own relatives, teachers, friends. He doesn't want to kill them.
A huge moral dilemma.
Absolutely. And Krishna explains why he must fight. It's his dharma, his duty as a warrior to fight for justice, even when it's incredibly difficult and the lines between right and wrong seem blurred.
That complexity, that doing your duty even when it's hard, must be why it resonates so much.
I think so. It addresses universal questions about duty, action, and the nature of reality in a very dramatic context. Widely read, deeply influential.
Definitely. Okay, moving through Smriti. Dharma Shastras. What are those?
These are essentially law books, but broader than just legal codes. They explain how dharma, that concept of righteous living and duty, applies to everyday life.
So practical guidelines.
Yes. Covering responsibilities in different life stages, student, householder, etc., civil and criminal law, rules about diet, festivals, pilgrimage, charity, the whole structure of a righteous life.
And being Smriti, they can be reinterpreted over time.
Exactly. Our source highlights that. They need to adapt.
Makes sense for laws and social codes. Then, Darshana Shastras.
These are the foundational texts for the 6 major schools of Hindu philosophy, the darshanas, or ways of seeing. They're more systematic philosophical explorations.
Any famous examples?
The Brahma Sutras, attributed to sage Vyasa, which try to synthesize the Upanishads, and the Yoga Sutras of sage Patanjali, the basis of yoga philosophy, are probably the most studied.
Ah, the Yoga Sutras. Okay, so that's where they fit in.
Yes. Then there are Agama Shastras. These are ancient texts, many apparently lost, focusing on the practical how-to of worship.
How do?
Yeah, like temple construction, rituals, idol installation, personal devotional practices. Less about the why, like the philosophical texts, and more about the how of engaging with the divine, practically.
Got it. Ritual and practice. And finally, bhakti texts.
This is a broad category. It includes teachings, poems, songs composed by saints and devotees, often in regional languages, not just Sanskrit.
So more localized, maybe more personal.
Often, yes. From ancient times right up to contemporary figures, they usually convey simple messages of devotion, love for God, dharma, spiritual practice, in a way that connects directly with people in their own cultural context.
Wow. Okay, that's an incredible overview. Vedas, Upanishads, Puranas, epics, law, philosophy, ritual, devotion. It really covers every aspect of life and thought.
It really does. Shruti as the foundation, Smriti as the vast structure built upon it.
Right. Now, you mentioned we have sources specifically about the Sita Upanishad. Let's zoom in on that one. Where does it fit?
Okay, so the Sita Upanishad is considered a minor Upanishad. It's linked to the Atharva Veda.
One of the 4 main Vedas.
Correct. But importantly, sources like Vyasa Mahabharata classify it as a late Shakta Upanishad, probably composed somewhere between the 12th and 15th centuries CE.
Shakta, meaning?
Focused on Shakti, the divine feminine principle, often personified as a goddess as the ultimate reality. So this Upanishad specifically elevates Goddess Sita.
Ah, interesting. So it's a later text, not part of the oldest layer, and it has a specific focus on the goddess. What does it actually teach about Sita?
Its core message is pretty radical, actually. It declares Sita is the supreme reality. She is Brahman, the ultimate ground of being, the source of everything.
So not just Rama's wife, as in the Ramayana.
Far beyond that in this text. She's identified with primordial Prakriti nature itself and embodies 3 fundamental powers: Icha, will or desire, Kriya, action, and Jnana, knowledge.
Will, action, knowledge, the forces that make anything happen.
Exactly. The Upanishad says the whole cosmos is the Atman, the self, living in the heart. And realizing this, self-realizing Sita as this ultimate reality, comes through vichara, self-inquiry, deep reflection.
Thinking things through for yourself.
Right. And samadhi, deep meditation. So it connects that individual spiritual practice directly to understanding Sita as the cosmos.
That links the personal quest to this grand cosmic vision of the goddess. How is this teaching presented?
It's framed as a dialogue. The gods go to Prajapati, the creator god, and ask him, essentially, who is Sita? What's her real nature?
And Prajapati explains her supreme status.
He does. He describes her as Prakriti, as Lakshmi, goddess of fortune, as Vishnu's own power, or Shakti. He even gives a symbolic breakdown of her name. Sas for Satya, truth, E for Maya, illusion but unchanging, Ta for the goddess of speech joined with Brahman.
Using the name itself to reveal deeper meaning? That's clever.
It is. The Radha name article also really emphasizes her as the foundation of nature, Yogamaya, this immense divine power, mother of the world.
Very powerful image.
The Upanishad itself describes her in incredibly expansive terms. She's everywhere. She illuminates everything. She's the sun, moon, stars. She's time itself. She manifests as gods, sages, humans, demons, the elements, the senses.
So literally everything.
Pretty much. The text says she is both different from and the same as the Lord, the essence of both the conscious and the inert.
A paradox almost.
It reflects the complex nature of ultimate reality in Hindu thought. The YouTube transcript also mentions her manifestations corresponding to the three gunas from Samkhya philosophy.
The what now?
The guna sattva, purity, light; rajas, activity, passion; tamas, inertia, darkness. She embodies all three as Shri or Lakshmi, sattva; Bhumi or earth, rajas; and Nila, often linked to destruction, tamas.
So she encompasses all the fundamental qualities of existence.
Exactly. And she's described as the vocal form of the Vedas, the source of all sacred knowledge, ethics, law, tradition, even the minor Vedas like architecture and medicine. She's the basis of the world, composed of Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, the Atman, and all beings.
That's just completely comprehensive. She is reality in this view.
That's the core message, a profound statement about the divine feminine.
Okay, now we touched on this briefly, but the understanding of Vedanta source talks about the authenticity of Upanishads. How does that apply here?
Right, so there's a traditional list of 108 Upanishads found in the Muktika Upanishad. The Sita Upanishad is on that list, number 45.
So it's officially recognized in that tradition.
It is. However, as we noted, it's considered a later text compared to the principal Upanishads, like, say, the Brihadaranyaka or Chandogya. And some scholars question the direct Vedic lineage or precise dating of these later Upanishads.
How do they judge that? What are the criteria?
The article mentions a few things. Do major early teachers, the Purvakaryas, comment on it or quote it? Is it found in existing branches or shakhas of the Vedas? Does its writing style match the older texts?
So historical and textual detective work.
Pretty much. Now, for the Sita Upanishad, while it's later, the article does point out some things supporting its acceptance.
Like what?
Well, the Muktika Upanishad itself, which lists it, was cited by Vidyaranya Swami, a very important 14th century figure. That suggests the list, including Sita, was known and respected then.
Okay, so it has historical weight.
And a scholar named Upanishad Brahma Yogin from the Kanchi Kamakoti Math actually wrote commentaries on all 108 Upanishads on that list. That shows acceptance within at least one major monastic tradition.
Someone thought it was important enough to study and explain.
Exactly. Plus, we know that specific commentaries were written on the Sita Upanishad, like the Deepika by Narayana Tirtha. So while maybe not having the same undisputed antiquity as the 10 or 12 principal Upanishads that figures like Shankara commented on extensively,
Right.
The Sita Upanishad clearly found a place, was studied, and preserved within the broader tradition, particularly within circles focused on the Atharva Veda and Shakta philosophy.
So authentic can mean different things, but it was certainly accepted and transmitted as a valid Upanishad within significant parts of the tradition.
That seems a fair summary, yes.
Okay, stepping back again.
Okay.
Given this sheer vastness, Shruti, Smriti, hundreds of texts, how do most Hindus actually engage with all this? Our Hindu scriptures source had a point on this, didn't it?
It did. It makes the very practical observation that most Hindus don't, sit down and read the Vedas cover to cover or even all the principal Upanishads directly.
Right. That would be a lifetime's work.
Or several. For many, learning comes primarily through family traditions, listening to discourses by priests or gurus, hearing stories.
The Puranas and epics again.
Exactly. And the Bhakti texts the songs and teachings of saints. Those are often the main vehicles for transmitting core beliefs and values.
So it's less about academic study for most people and more about absorbing the wisdom through stories, songs, and community teachings.
That's generally true. The huge number of scriptures isn't necessarily meant for every individual to master personally. It provides this incredibly rich resource, this diverse menu of guidance, and people tend to focus on what's most relevant to their own path, their particular tradition, or their teacher's guidance.
So the vastness offers options rather than being a mandatory reading list.
You could definitely see it that way.
Well, this has been quite the deep dive. We've covered a huge amount of ground.
We certainly have. From the overall structure, that crucial Shruti-Smriti distinction through the major types of texts like Vedas, Upanishads, Puranas, epics, and then drilling down into the Sita Upanishad with its powerful vision of the divine feminine.
Yeah. So just to recap the main takeaways for you listening, Hindu scripture is this vast ancient collection broadly split into Shruti, heard, foundational divine, and Smriti, remembered, interpretive, adaptable. Texts like the Vedas and principal Upanishads are Shruti. Epics, Puranas, law books are generally Smriti.
Right. And within that, we saw how a later text like the Sita Upanishad could offer a specific, powerful perspective, identifying goddess Sita with Brahman, the ultimate reality. It shows the tradition's dynamism.
Absolutely. And ultimately, all these diverse texts, in different ways, aim to guide individuals on their spiritual path, offering wisdom suited to different needs and understandings.
Which leads us, I suppose, to a final thought for you to reflect on.
Go for it.
How does this ancient wisdom, constantly being interpreted and reinterpreted over millennia, still speak to us today? How does it offer insights into reality, into the human condition in our, very modern world?
And maybe, thinking about everything we've discussed, which part of this vast scriptural landscape resonates most with you personally? Is it the philosophical depth of the Upanishads, the epic stories, the devotional songs, the practical guidelines?
Perhaps this conversation has sparked your curiosity to explore one particular thread a bit further on your own journey.